Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning into episode 16 of Unboxing New Music. My name is Boon Hua, and the concept of this show is to introduce and have a conversation with some of the finest composers and performers based in Singapore and Asia on contemporary music. Today's episode will be a little bit different with regards to listening to the works with score, and you'll find out why in just a bit. The live component of this show allows for real-time audience interaction, so I encourage our audience to let us know that you are there and are excited about this show by saying hello, sharing this video, or asking questions. And without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest for tonight. He is a composer, entrepreneur, and business consultant. He composes music for use in commercial productions, some of which have included projects by MTV, American Greetings, and Fox Digital Entertainment. He founded East Coast Scoring, which is an orchestra contracting and production company based in Boston, and actively coaches small business owners on branding and sales. Please join me in welcoming Li Xiao'an for a no-holds-barred conversation. From our warm-up routine, we know that I think this will be a very fun conversation, and I'm kind of throwing out the usual structure of, doing two pieces and all that for tonight, because I feel like there's a lot of real talk that can happen tonight, and I'm very I'm very curious to see where we can go.
The first bit of real talk is that just make sure everyone knows the Fox IP. The Fox thing was an IP that I worked on that belonged to Fox, Futurama. Okay. And it was made into a game, and then that's Futurama. What I worked on. Yeah, but it was made into a mobile game. And what was the other thing? I don't really do so much the business consulting thing anymore. But at one point, I was advising at a nonprofit in Boston. It was just sort of like a side thing. But yeah. For the most part now, everything is music.
Everything's music, great. So, today's topic is on music for video games and media. But before we go there, I'd like to find out more about kind of your growing up. We talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure.
And I was wondering if you had like a kind of a traditional music upbringing. Like, do you learn piano when you were a kid? Or how did music come to your life?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, my face very obvious. I think like almost every other kid in Singapore, especially those in privileged circumstances, I was sent to piano lessons at a very young age, without too much guidance on why it was important, right? But I didn't last very long because I didn't want to practice, right? And the funny thing is that some of my earliest memories covering those piano lessons is that I would come to the lesson saying I didn't practice, but I wrote something. I was like 7, I think. Yeah, and it was just very, very simple stuff. 1-4-5 melody, because I figured out that on the left hand, if you kept the same shape, you could make things that sounded nice. That was it when I was 7 years old. Then music sort of like disappeared from my life for many years, right? And when I was 16, I saw a couple of my friends playing classical guitar in school. Right, and by the way, to answer your other question, my entire family is non-musical except one cousin who actually happens to play in the SSO. I don't know if you know him, William Tan.
I don't think I know him.
He's also an underwater photographer. Anyway, he likes to say about himself, I hope you'll forgive me, he likes to call himself Last Violin. But yeah, so that's my one musical connection in the family. But so when I was 16, I picked up classical guitar, and I actually found that it helped me to learn things academically more effectively because pattern recognition, memory, that sort of thing, none of that really clicked for me. I was always sort of like, I felt like before that I had some kind of a learning disability, but when I picked it up, it sort of made my brain snap into place where it was kind of loose. And then so academic stuff became a lot easier for me after that.
Was this really kind of a moment
it wasn't
where
like
everything just happened? Because when I was reading
it wasn't like
article,
it wasn't like one day.
It seemed like that's a magical solution.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of magical, but I don't know if it works for every person's brain. It happened to work for my brain, and I think it'll work for a lot of particular people's brains. But for me, I think the main thing was that when I used to take in information, right, it was very difficult for me to retain it, to comprehend it, to all the usual things that you might associate with someone with ADHD or ADD or something like that, right? But at that time, I think when I started learning classical guitar. And the piece that really sort of started shaping the way I approached music was Romance d'Amour. Like everybody learns that piece on classical guitar. And because the left hand had the thumb had a repeating pattern, and these three fingers had a repeating pattern, right? And basically the whole first part of the song, right, only has me holding down one string. So it was very easy for me to compartmentalize those three aspects. And I think that formed the foundation for me to later be able to compartmentalize and digest information in a more, in an easier and more like digestible way. I can't find the word for it. Yeah, so I learned when I was 16, and I also started singing. I started learning electric guitar. I had a band, and I joined MDC in the Army, right? And I, like I mentioned, I also learned classical voice for a year with a teacher who did a really good job, Jong Irie. And when I was in the Army, I applied for Berkeley. And I thought at that time that I was going to be a session musician. So
how did that thought come into place? I mean, how did that, was it, when did you decide that you wanted to do music? Because before that...
I think it, yeah, sorry.
No, please.
Yeah. I guess it was like athletics, right? I wasn't really very good at anything, like nothing. As I was good at reading, I guess. But when I was 14, I started winning competitions in canoeing in SJI, right? So that was one thing that I was good at, and that motivated me to do that. And when I picked up music, something about it sort of appealed to me because it was a reward, just from a behavioral perspective. Nothing else that I had been doing up to that point had rewarded me as much as that. And that's why I became so enamored with it, and I wanted to pursue it. It has nothing to do with anything metaphysical or inspirational. It really is, I think, at the heart of it, just a reward system. And because I knew this was something I could be good at, I felt like I wanted to pursue it. I think that's the simple answer to it.
Yeah, I'm not. I guess it's important also for people to know that when somebody decides to do something, it doesn't need to be a huge, world-beating argument why I decided to do music. It can be something as simple as I just enjoy the sensation of playing with people. Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like these simple pleasures, right? They can be very meaningful. I mean, you can find great meaning in something that costs nothing.
Absolutely.
Right? Great meaning in a plate of chicken rice, right? It's everyone can afford it. It forms a huge part of our national identity, and yet it doesn't cost anything. And then but we have to ask ourselves, why are people chasing salaries of like 200, 300, 400,000, 500,000, just climbing that ladder, doing something they hate? Right? So, I mean, we need to ask that question of people who do that, and, they're not going to be able to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, you like this exact statement really kind of hits the argument about this whole ministerial salaries. I mean, I don't want to get to that because right?
I don't get blackballed, huh?
I mean, it is called public service for a reason. But anyway, let's just leave it as such.
Yeah, right.
So how were you attracted to like jazz composition? Did you start to dabble into that during your time at MDC?
So it was slightly before that. I discovered a video of Joe Pass, who is a very famous jazz guitarist, right? And I was amazed, and I tried to find everything else that was like that. And I think I was just really inspired by how it sounded, and also because I had a very immature understanding of music at that point. So I was very attracted to how complex it was, right? And that was why I sought it out, right? Because I thought it was a higher level. Of course, it's bullshit, right? But this is why I sought it out. And and then when I went to Berkeley and I enrolled in, it was the only music school I applied to because, like I mentioned, I don't have a music pedigree. I didn't study music formally until Berkeley.
Yeah? But why Berkeley? How did that brand come?
Okay, so it is a famous school, right? For the thing that I thought I was qualified to start learning at a college level, right? So that's one, right? And number two, I felt that there was no way I was going to get into a conservatory, and I was probably right because at the time I was playing electric guitar, I was singing rock music, I was singing some classical music, right? So to me, it was between Berkeley or like a school to learn opera, which in retrospect, I'm very glad I didn't do that. Not because there's anything wrong with opera, it's just that I think I would just kill myself having to learn all that music and perform and wear the costumes. Yeah, no way. Because I say this because I staffed 5 operas in Boston with orchestra musicians, right? So I see in the background exactly how difficult it is. So yeah,
Yes.
I didn't go to learn that.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, but yeah, I learned. I went to Berkeley because I thought it would take me. I thought it was the highest chance that it would give me the opportunity to learn music, which is really all I wanted.
I was just going to talk. I mean, I wanted
Wait,
to.
one
Please.
important thing to say about that. I understand that not everyone has the sheer financial luxury of being able to attend a school like Berkeley, right?
And in Boston too.
Yes, I phrase it like, oh, it was the only school that would take me. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I could, if I worked hard, I probably could have gone to LaSalle. But at the time, because I was as yet unaware of how different people live and how lucky I was to have that financial backing, it was the only choice that I had in my mind. Yeah.
I was going to say, you made a point about you felt because you were doing so many things, you were doing electric guitar, you were doing this and that you felt like that was the only place that could take your diverse talents. And I think that's always kind of a misnomer because like a lot of classical musicians now, they like to reveal a little bit of their past. Oh, I used to be a rock drummer, now I'm a conductor, you know, that kind of thing. And it seems to be a kind of something that you can show off. Whereas there's really, it's kind of the thinking, right? In some ways that thinking of being, you can only do one thing that's set up for you. And if you don't fall into that box, then, you know, if you don't fall into the box of being a classical musician by a certain age, then you shouldn't feel like you can do it. When the actual fact is there shouldn't be any restrictions. There shouldn't be any. I'm just going around in circles now. I'm sorry, but I don't know if you got my point.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, I mean, it's some Berkeley seems to understand that diversity of talent is very valuable, especially because if you consider that. So this is like, I made a video about this, you know, so when a lot of people try to do one thing, right, they try to do one thing really well, but there's so many people that try to do orchestral music as composers, there's so many people that try to do hip-hop music as composers, but if you combine the two, you will find that there are much fewer people that are able to compete with you credibly, right? So if you have a bunch of different talents and you manage to find a way to put them together, that's good for you, right? I was a mediocre conductor, right, starting out, and then I finished off being a slightly less mediocre conductor. But
we all have to start somewhere.
Yeah, but the thing is, no one would have given me the opportunity if I had not started that first recording session. No one would have given me a sniff of a chance to conduct a real ensemble unless I did it myself, and that's what I did, right? So as a mediocre conductor, as a mediocre music producer, right, and a mediocre businessman, right out of school, I put all those things together and I created the recording orchestra that I was working with, right? And someone who was an amazing conductor couldn't have done that if that's all they were.
Right.
So, you know, the diversity of talent sometimes is even more important than being 100% perfection. That's
very, very true. Yeah, I have some thoughts that I don't think crystallizes themselves yet, so I'm going to hold back that. Do you have any mentors in Singapore that guided your way before you went to Berkeley?
So 3 months before I went to Berkeley, I went through an intensive music theory study period, right? Boot camp, right? I studied with Jeremy Lam. He is an excellent pedagogue, right? and he crystallized a lot of my knowledge, because at that point I just, I would go to Yamaha. I don't know anything. I was just like, that book looked good. I'll take that and I'll read it and I'll learn a few things about classical harmony here. And then I will go on the internet. I'll learn about quartal harmony before I knew what the hell intervals were.
Nice.
Right. And then I would pick. So I had a lot of different knowledge, right? That was very disorganized. So Jeremy helped me to organize that into something that allowed me to skip most of the core classes at Berkeley.
Oh, wow. But you went there studying jazz composition. So you auditioned to do, so you had to show your portfolio or something, or?
Well, I auditioned, you audition as a performer. So everyone at Berkeley has to have at least some degree of performance ability. Some degree, the bar is not super high. I mean, I got in, right? So and you go there and then you audition and then you take like maybe a semester or two of core classes and then you choose your major. And when the time came to choose my major, I chose jazz composition. But I took a lot of courses, took a lot of electives from conducting, from classical composition, and a few performance classes also.
Cool. So it's kind of like a liberal arts college in some ways, but it's kind of music focused.
No, it's very much music focused. We do have to take liberal arts classes, and everyone resents it when we have to take those classes, except art history, because I had a really good professor, right? But I thought of it more as a vocational school, right? Because everything that we learned, I considered to be very practical in application. Like nothing was particularly esoteric. I didn't pay enough attention in music history, for example. I was only really interested in the practical classes. Yeah, but I wouldn't call it a liberal arts college.
Okay. No, I mean, just kind of the model of you choose your major only later. You come in and you take a bunch of different classes.
I see.
Getting
Okay.
different exposures.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe we can just listen to Love Radiates. Just
sure.
I mean, it just kind of feels like that's the right piece to listen to at this point.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us a little bit about this, why you wrote it, and what are the circumstances?
So I sent you two pieces, right? And then you picked this one. But these two pieces were written because for 5 years, I had spent most of my time writing for other people. And I felt that it was not ideal. It was not ideal that I did not write anything for myself at all. And I just had no motivation to write for myself, except once in a while I'd write something small. So the first piece, Slice of Life, which is not this one, this is the second one that I wrote, right? I would do one every year for 2 years, right? And
so
the first one, it's very recent. This one was recorded last year in New York, actually. Yeah. So with the first one, I mean, I just touched it only when I felt like it, which is why it took, I normally would crack out something of that length in a few days, but that took me like maybe a month, because I would only approach it when I felt like writing, because I didn't want it to be tainted with me going, fuck, I just finished it. I didn't want that to get in the way. So for this one, it was just another one of those pieces that I just felt like writing. One where I don't need to be clever. I just write what I feel like writing. And fortunately or unfortunately, what I feel like writing usually ends up being smooth jazz, just because that genre speaks to me a lot, because I feel like, and this also speaks to my approach in general for music, is that I feel that it must be written for the pleasure of others. And I'm not all the time, at least when I write, I like to write things that are nice. And the thing is, nice things don't have to be musically insipid or simple, right? Because as you've heard, I mean, if you heard the piece already, there's several modulations, there's chromatic harmony, there's like all this other stuff going on. There's pretty technically difficult guitar parts, right? And the saxophone part, even though it sounds nice, because the guy is able to do it, right? It's very tiring to play,
right.
So yeah, so I like the idea of taking the best of what I've learned over the years and presenting that in a way that is palatable to pretty much everyone.
Cool. Let's have a listen. Cool. Giant ukulele. You're muted.
I was saying that's basically what it is, plus 2 strings.
So you say this is a
Yeah.
personal piece. So that means this piece is not you're not using this piece for.
No, I've not sold it. I don't plan to sell it. If someone wants to come and license it for a sitcom that should have aired 20 years ago, then then sure. But otherwise, I mean, this is really sort of a personal project.
Okay,
And for no reason other than for my personal pleasure.
I
Yeah.
see.
Mm.
And so just kind of oops,
Mm-hmm.
no, my Siri just started talking to me. My
Oh.
Siri just started talking to me, so it's kind of
Oh,
crazy.
yeah.
So then, kind of as a complete opposite, then we should probably start
Mm-hmm.
talking a little bit about kind of your work, your
Yeah, sure.
about commercial music and kind of the business music, the commercial music industry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just let me get my stuff in order.
Yeah, by the way, before you play those other two pieces, might be wise to, I think, take down the volume by 20% or something like that.
Is it quite loud over on your side? To me,
Um,
it sounds
it,
all right
it,
over
it
here
may
because
be.
I'm at
I,
50%.
yeah, oh, you are? Okay. So, I mean
Mm.
the source volume, like on the video. The
Mm-hmm.
reason for that, I think, is because like if it gets sent to the software at above a certain level, it gets compressed.
Right, then it gets the
It gets clipped, yeah.
absolutely. Sorry, I think I
Of course, it
closed
sounds
the
fine over where you are because you're you're listening to the source.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I've closed the
Yeah.
window
Sure, no problem.
accidentally and I was completely lost. Okay, now I'm back on again.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you said that you compose this piece for your own pleasure, and I remember from a
Mhm.
interview with a kind of a field composer, and he said something along the lines of like, identity is always on the forefront of many young composers, and sometimes this question, this very very big question about identity, who am I? There's so much emotional baggage that you cannot just compose out of pleasure anymore, and you
Yeah.
just wanted to put
Yeah, I
something
know.
out there.
I understand how that feels.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think kind of what fascinates me most about you is kind of like your kind of attitude to things. You just want you're who you are. You're unabashedly
Hmm.
um
I
Xiao'an.
have no choice. I have no choice. I mean, like maybe I wouldn't do it if I was able to hide it, But I mean, for the most part, I think in my life, I've it's been shown that my face reveals a lot of things. Like in general, like it's very difficult for me not to be honest about that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
on the topic of identity and I think a lot of young composers kind of get stuck because they feel every piece that they write and every note that they write is supposed to feel like their magnum opus, right? But
Precious. Yeah.
for those of us that work in the field where you have to just turn it out tomorrow, you learn
Mm.
to eventually distance yourself from your work, which in moderation is a very good thing, because the
Mm.
way to get fast, the way to get good, the way to sort of be able to do a lot of different things is to do it a lot. And the only way you're going to do that is if you write fast and you have to accept yourself. So over a long period of time of throwing your work away, you don't get too precious about it, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember one of my conducting teachers was telling me, don't let the sensation of a bad rehearsal or a bad concert go past the next meal, because you
Mm.
will always be unhappy about something, and you just need to
Yeah,
distance yourself. Okay, think about what went right and what went wrong, and then after that, let's move on to something else. Otherwise, you're
yeah,
always kind of living
absolutely.
in yesterday instead of looking for the tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this kind of
If you
attitude,
if
it's
you if your mind is on something that you did 6 months ago,
mhm.
it means you haven't been writing enough since then. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think you're coming from a very entrepreneurial point of view, right? It's same thing with kind of social media content, like contents
Mm.
on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and
Mhm.
there's this message about kind of just put it out there, just put it out there, just put volume out there. Don't care so much about the
Mhm.
quality yet. Just put it out there
Mhm.
so you are able to um once you start to be too precious about something, then you won't post. And I think you're coming
Yeah.
from that
Right.
attitude of just do it.
There's that. There's that, and also just like it's also like a mental health thing, right? And I'm not the first composer to think this way. I mean, like Ravel was able to hold his work at a distance, I think,
Mm-hmm.
right? In certain cases, right? And I mean, there's some people like I guess Beethoven is an example of who takes himself too seriously, and look where that got him.
Well, I mean, he has some, not
He's
so
not.
great works too.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, and some very overrated works, but overall, I like him. I'm nowhere near as good as that. So props to the guy. Um, but yeah, if we take ourselves too seriously, and we have no idea what it is that we're going to do that's going to touch people. We may have an inkling as professionals, but we really you cannot predict. Like sometimes you put something out into the world that you thought was stupid. Like for example, I don't know if you saw the video that I put out with the stupid pirate ship
I love that. It's super
moving.
funny.
Yeah, yeah. So the thing is, like when my wife convinced me to do that, because I was like, it's too stupid. I was thinking to myself, it's just like beyond the threshold of idiocy, right? So, but then I put it out there and people enjoyed it. So like you really have no idea. And very often, if we take ourselves too seriously, we just stop our own progress.
Yeah. I mean, there were also two recent Facebook posts on, you also wrote on Medium that you shared, that I shared, that you wrote and then I shared because I felt it was such a strong call to action. It's called Do Something, Anything. And I love that. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure.
Any musician can get on numerous streaming platforms and be heard around the world, regardless of their ability. The sheer number of free tools we have to build and promote an online presence to sell our work is nothing short of amazing. We can learn all we need to build careers as creative people, social media marketing, personal branding, basic graphics design, etc. Via e-learning. And basically, it's kind of really a call to action, right? Like at the same time, it's also very compassionate because you talk about, don't blame yourself for things you can't do, and any improvement is better than no improvement. Something is better than nothing, and I just love that kind of hustle mentality, even in this situation, that it shouldn't stop.
Okay, sorry. Just want to clarify. I'd like to distance myself from the word hustle, because you can do everything, but that should never come at the expense of your mental health or your the emotional health of those that are important to you,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess also the word hustle kind of falls into your other article about the economic elitism, which maybe we can get to that because I think that's a very pertinent topic. But so for game music, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the projects you have done and what are the.
Okay, so I used to be a little bit embarrassed about this, but I guess I'm not anymore. Like most of my money, right, that I've made that's allowed me to continue living and upgrade my gear and stuff like that has been working with companies like American Greetings, writing 100 variations of Happy Birthday, right? That kept me afloat. They found me randomly on SoundCloud shortly after I graduated, which was very lucky, right? And they liked my work, which at the time was not very good. So it was great that they gave me a chance. But eventually for 4 years, I've worked on like 70, 80 projects for them, right? And
who is they?
Short videos. American Greetings, that's the company.
But there's a person that was looking for this specifically, or?
Well, I mean their music department, right? I think they were looking for people to outsource some of their overflow too, right? So I eventually became the guy that they came to for ideas. So like, we need an orchestral arrangement for this thing, right? Just make it, send us MIDI and send us stems, right? Stems are like when you break out all the different audio parts, like I have the strings in one audio file and then I have the percussion in one audio file, for example, that's stems, right? So I would send them that and they would use that as sort of the basis for further composition. I made their job a lot easier, right? Sometimes they would use it verbatim and sometimes they would use it to create something else. So American Greetings, and also one of my best employers has been a company that makes casino games, slots games, right? And I write music for that, right? And all this music that you see me post, most of it is for slots, right?
Interesting.
But this company is very unusual. The audio director is like very unusually focused on having good music, and they're willing to pay for it, which is something I'm very grateful for, right? And it's a very good relationship. So those are most of my jobs. Once in a while, I do like in 2016 I did that Futurama game for a company called Wuga in Germany. Most of my stuff is mobile. I haven't quite hit on a big console title yet, nor am I sure if I really want to.
What are the big differences
And I can
between
explain
like
that.
big console titles and kind of mobile games?
So it used to be that mobile games were less serious, or they didn't make as much money, so you would be paid less. But as we all know now, the mobile games market is massive, just
Right.
massive, right? So the rates, I think, if you have the right client, right, are decent. And the difference is that I think for mobile games, generally the size of the deliverable is a lot smaller. So, they're not going to put like 100-minute soundtrack in a mobile game generally,
Right.
just because of the download, how much you have to download. So generally the order size is smaller, but the rate for the order size is pretty good. Yeah, and for console games, they tend to take a lot longer. They're very expensive to produce all around, like all aspects of it, and they tend to, because there's so much at stake, there's a lot more unhealthy pressure, I think, on everyone working on it to get it done faster and faster and faster. Because the shareholders want to save money, obviously, because every additional day that you work is going to cost more, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there an inclination towards like, I mean, when you say something is bigger and expensive, I'm thinking also kind of more symphonic. Is that inclination, is it real, or it's, I mean, I'm sure
It's
for mobile games, they're
not
also
necessarily
big.
yeah, not necessarily connected.
Okay.
Just because in for example, Candy Crush, one of the versions of Candy Crush recorded the London Symphony Orchestra.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Does it show on the app?
well, I mean, it doesn't. Of course, it doesn't show the video or anything, but they did have sort of a press release about it at one point. I think this was a few years ago, right? And sometimes on AAA games, I mean, they just they license music. AAA is in like the big console titles, Call of Duty, whatever, right? I mean, I think we're moving away from seeing the orchestra as sort of like the god level for a composer, right? Because there's a lot of different styles and all of them are equally valid, right, in the right context. So I think we're going to see a lot more diversity in styles. But for a long time, yes, orchestra was seen as sort of like, that's the big one,
And how has like sampling kind of changed this whole, I mean, like big sampling libraries?
Yeah.
Because they sound really
So
incredible.
for example, yeah, the work that you are going to play, right, of mine, is completely electronically derived, right? In that either the sound was recorded at some point early, and then I triggered that sound. Like for example, there's a snare drum, which is mapped to the C on my keyboard, and then I perform that in. But that recording was already made, right, at all the different velocity levels with all the, the effects and everything. So what sample libraries have done is they have made the barrier to entry a lot lower, in that someone like me working, by the way, that piece that you saw, I wrote on this dining table, right, in this acoustically untreated room with headphones. Not these are terrible with these. Right. So I think sample libraries have made it possible for composers who are unable to record an orchestra to realize their compositions a lot more easily and a lot more cheaply. Of course, it is unfortunate because I'm on both sides, right? Because I ran a recording orchestra, right, for a while. So on the one hand, it makes it a lot easier for composers. On the other hand, work is sort of drying up, I think, for a lot of people who have for orchestras that have traditionally made their living recording, for these kinds of games. So I mean, there's still a few that are making money, but yeah, sample libraries have made, especially the ones that are super convincing, have made it so that you don't really need to hire them all the time.
Right. And the cost as well. I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's not super cheap, right? My a string library, there's one of the 3 or 4 string libraries that I have costs about $1,000, right? And that was just the strings, right? And my computer is like 4,000 plus, right? And I have like several hard drives, one 8 terabyte hard drive back home in Singapore, right? It's RAID equipped so that I have redundancy. And, so it is still expensive, and it is still very much, if you have the money and you don't have debt, you have a very big advantage in this industry.
I see.
To be able to acquire all this stuff. But that being said, the barrier is much lower. You don't have to work at a big composer studio in order to have access to these resources.
Right. And do people use the sample? So they are not. How should I phrase it? So people use these as the actual recording instead of just being able to actualize how the music sound and then actually get an orchestra to record it.
So that is ideal. So, for example, John Powell, right? The famous film composer, right? He posts a lot of stuff that shows the difference between his mockups, right, and the actual orchestra recording, because the mockups are necessary because you need to get it as close to final as possible so that the director doesn't have to use too much imagination, to figure out how it's gonna sound, right? Otherwise, you only know what it's gonna sound like on the soundstage. That's a distinct advantage. And for people like that with the budget, right, eventually what they do is they take the mock-up, they get someone to do what's known as MIDI takedown, where they take the MIDI file, which is all the information, all the notes that were played in, at what velocity, at what length, etc., right? And they take that and they turn it in, with an orchestrator, they turn that into a score and parts. And then they contract the orchestra and then they play that, and then, whatever, they can play it at exactly the same tempo, etc., because they will have all the MIDI tempo maps that with all the tempo changes that are already logged in there. So yeah, I mean, you can take it to that point. And I have recorded with orchestra before, rarely, because generally people don't want to pay for it. You ask any composer, they would love to work with an orchestra. Yeah. It's not us. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I should play Hopping Hearts or Pirate Kraken?
Pirate Kraken. Let's do that.
Okay. Just gonna adjust the volume a little bit.
So the nature of this piece, is supposed to loop back seamlessly. So I have a hard cut of the audio file, and if the software will just repeat it seamlessly, so it doesn't sound like it has any ending. And I know why you laugh at the end, because like, are you truly a commercial composer if you don't rip off host at least once? Like, badly. Don't even care about the actual orchestration. Just put in a few of the elements.
No, I have no qualms about that. No, it doesn't. I mean, everybody rips off somebody at some point. It's.
I mean, it's very true. Yeah.
Also,
I mean, I would write more. I would make it more original if that's what people actually wanted.
And how does that process? I mean, how does that creative process come about? When a client, for example, approaches you and say, "Okay, I want pirate music." How does the whole process, if you can take us through that? Because I think
sure, okay. So every client is a little bit different. So with this particular client, he didn't come and just say, I want pirate music, right? I mean, he's worked with us for a while, and he has a good description. He gives some of the concept art that's in the game. right? And then he tells us a little bit about what they're trying to achieve, and then he uses musical references like YouTube links or MP3 files or whatever, so that we can kind of be on the same page, at least, you know, from a listening perspective. Because you can describe music all you want, right? You can say serene, right? And there's so many ways to approach that, right? You can say dramatic, and what kind of dramatic do you mean? Do you mean Strauss? You know, is that what you mean? Because everyone means Strauss. I mean, specifically, wait, I'm not going to out myself as a historically illiterate person, so I'm not going to quote the specific piece. But yeah, so then after giving us the references, you know, then we will talk about it a little bit more about finer aspects of instrumentation. And then, you know, at that point, once all the details are down and we've signed off and everything, there's nothing to do but to make a draft, right? So if I'm very confident, I'll just make the whole thing. If I'm not, I'll be like, here's 10 seconds. Is that what you're looking for? And if he says yes, then I'll finish the 60 seconds. But with this client, very often, because the creative direction is very clear, right? I just go off and write the whole thing from the start. It's only been once that I've had something like that return and I'm like, shit, I got it wrong. You know, but for the most part, yeah.
Is it kind of 1 minute clips? Is that kind of the industry standard?
There is no industry standard specifically, but like for this client, because of the format of their games, and they make a lot of games, right? So they use a very similar format all the way, so that the engineering team can sort of just like stick it in, and they don't have to worry about any kind of customizations, you know, beyond what they already have to do. So 60 seconds, 30 seconds, we've generally not done anything over 60 seconds with these guys.
I see.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, 60 seconds is a pretty nice length, because as a composer, I feel like it allows me to, if you want to keep the energy up, right? And this piece is like high energy throughout, and that's because it's slots, right? And they have 2 minutes, like I will kill myself, right? Just trying to keep the energy up for 2 minutes. Even sometimes 60 seconds. I think my biggest pushback with this client sometimes is that he'll be like, it needs to be more exciting. And I'll be like, there needs to be contrast. And he's like, no. So, I mean, he's a musician. He's a musician. You know, he's been doing this for a long time. So they know what they want, right? So, but yeah, I mean, 60 seconds is what we do usually for this client.
And how is your process of conceptualizing this whole thing? So you think of it in your head, and then you start playing on the keyboard and record it into your computer? Or?
Okay. So I have, I mean, this interview would be too short for this, but I have a very big template of orchestral textures and instruments and everything. It's actually laid out in the form of an orchestral score. So I will select the track like flute 1, or select piccolo, right? Flute 3 and piccolo are basically the same for me, because I don't have them playing at the same time, right? They're doubling. And I play each line in, right? So every like individual instrument is played in. So that pirate music that you heard, every single instrument that you heard was played in individually. And not only was it played in individually, there are several other parameters that you have to add to it, because playing on the keyboard doesn't tell the computer how much vibrato you need to put in it. It doesn't tell you specifically which articulation to use, maybe. It also doesn't really, I use a thing called a breath controller, right? This goes in my mouth, right? And I blow into it, and it transmits data. It transmits a number between 0 to 127 to the computer, right? Constantly over time. So I use that to control the velocity of the instrument, especially a wind instrument or anything with a sustained note. I don't use it for percussion. I don't use it for harp or anything.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there are several different parameters, and each one of those has to be massaged into place so that it sounds realistic. Yeah.
So
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly.
Every single note, all those colorful boxes and everything, that's when I've combined everything together. But each of those is actually like on separate tracks. I have like 70, 80 different tracks, right? And so each of those are an instrument. Eventually you get pretty fast at it, but it takes practice. It's like performance, you know.
But are you kind of improvising? So you have a bass track or a bass tempo, and then you kind of
Mm-hmm.
improvising little licks on top of it, and then just kind of adding. I
No,
don't
it's
know.
from
I mean,
zero.
it's really
From
from
zero.
zero.
It's from zero. So you need to conceptualize everything from the melody to the accompaniment. It's like when you start, there's nothing. There's no notes. It's like a blank score, except that now when you write a note, the score plays a sound back at you, right? So it's basically the same thing. So you have to write every single note and you have to perform it in, you have to determine its articulation, you have to determine its volume, its expression, whatever, its tone. So yeah, I mean, you are sort of being a performer and a conductor at the same, and the composer at the same time. So it's very often done bit by bit. Like, and if there is any sort of like overarching, sometimes I put in a piano sketch first, so that I can remember the structure that's in my head, and then when I have the piano sketch and I see like I've played a C chord, right, and then I know at that point, right, what I'm doing, so I can choose. The instrumentation is sort of something that I improvise, but it's not really improvisation if it's not like you're performing in front of an audience. It's just composing.
Right.
Yeah.
And trying things out, putting in things.
Yeah. Throwing away a lot. Yeah.
Shall we listen
most
to
of the job?
Shall we listen to the other track?
Sure.
Hopping Hearts.
Yeah, you might want to turn the volume down about 20%
Still.
on the QuickTime player. On the QuickTime player specifically.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, don't really need to show the video because it's not synced up with streaming. Yeah.
But I just like seeing the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. So that's where it loops back to the beginning.
Also, this is a slot machine.
Yep, it's also a slot machine.
Weird,
right?
No, but I remember watching a documentary on slot machines, and how they were talking about the colors have to be bright in order to entice people to play, and the music has to be
exciting,
not just catchy. Yeah, exciting. Is that kind of a formula that you abide to?
No, I think like if the music is kind of exciting and good, it should be fine. I think that definitely one of the biggest problems if it gets too monotonous, right? Which you will always run into because it's just has to be exciting all the time. It's obviously going to get monotonous, so you have to figure out a way to not be monotonous. But the thing is, as you have seen, my assignments go from being like Mozart bassoon concerto to Pirates of the Caribbean music to Egyptian dance music. Like I have another one, and also Chinese New Year music, by the way. So the thing is, like, because these are all different genres and they sound very different, the sort of techniques to make it not boring will differ from piece to piece. I would say that like with any kind of good orchestration generally has a new element or some kind of a fresh element introduced every few bars, right? It doesn't have to be super like in your face, right? But if there's like a repetitive rhythm going on, you definitely have to introduce sort of new orchestral elements. So I try to vary up the textures, give everybody a voice. That's also kind of how I wrote for big band and orchestra. Is I would try to pass melodies around because I don't want someone to just play whole notes for the whole thing. I know sometimes the music demands it, but I'm like, I also care about the orchestra.
Oh, that's very
I
nice.
want them to have fun. Yeah, I feel like people should more. By the way, you know, is there some kind of like a contemporary classical competition that I don't know about where everyone must write a high D on a flute? In because like in the 5 operas that I staffed, there were like 3 high
There,
Ds.
there, yeah, there are some, kind of very I can't find the word.
Assholes?
No, 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 no. I don't mean that. But some. I'm thinking about a word where it's like a chess move that you always do at the beginning. Some gambits.
Oh, I see.
There are some gambits in contemporary classical music that you see
Yeah.
happen a lot again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always just either this kind of fuzzy opening or something very rhythmic, and I mean it's whichever works.
Signal that you're cool, I guess.
No, but I mean there's only so many ways you can start a piece, and then when somebody comes up with something completely different, that's where it becomes really interesting, and that's why people are always thinking about how they can renew the process, how they can do something completely unheard of, which makes it very fun in that sense.
You know, the funny thing is that I don't know if you're familiar with this work. It's called Madame Whitesnake. It's a Pulitzer-winning opera, right? By the music was by Zhou Long, right? The composer. Are you familiar with his work?
I'm not very familiar with Zhou Long's pieces, unfortunately.
Okay, Zhou Long, yeah. So the thing is, like nothing about the opera that he wrote for, which had antiphonal choirs and stuff like that. Actually, right? None of it surprised me in a bad way. None of it seemed to me like, oh, that's weird, you know. But almost every other thing I've watched in contemporary classical music has led to moments like, oh, that's weird. I wouldn't do that, right? But everything that he did was original, yet unselfish. And I feel like that's a very, because when you ask someone to write for your libretto, you are in service. This
True.
My conducting teacher, when he was smoking a cigarette one day, told me, Xiao'an, you'll never be a composer, you know? And I was like, why? And he said, you don't have the ego. And I think it's because of this ego that a lot of like composers want to piss on everything. Like you work on a project, you have to make it yours. Why? Just make something nice and then go off and do something else. Right? You know, I don't know what it is. This is kind of why I've really sort of I've never really been able to identify with that part, with the people who have decided to sort of make their life about contemporary classical music as composers. I'm not sure where the motivation comes from. So my conducting teacher was right.
Well, I think there are. I think everybody has kind of, like as you mentioned before, everybody has something that makes them tick. Either it's kind of to create a certain reaction, emotion, to get a certain emotional response or something like that. And I think everybody's always looking to see what new ways they can challenge the status quo, or what interesting ways to produce something. And I think that I think there has to be 2 camps. I mean, Mozart was great not because he was a great innovator. He was in some sense, but he was great being kind of great at his craft that is already being established. In some ways, you can call Haydn an even greater innovator, and then Beethoven came along and pushed everybody off the chairs. And there is always both. There's always the innovator, and there's always kind of more conservative and being great at what they are. And I think both ideas are equally valid. I mean, with that, this is kind of a hard pivot, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the Asian Game Audio Summit, because that seems to be a project that you are very passionate about.
Yeah.
And
Postpone
because of COVID.
Postpone. Yeah. What would you like to
know? Why you feel that was an important step to take?
Okay, so in 10 years in the US, I made a lot of friends in the industry, and some of them are a lot of composers and sound designers and voice directors that I respect. And a lot of them are very interested in expanding out into Asia, right? I mean, especially for a lot of Americans, Asia is this kind of like big monolithic thing that, you know, they're not really able to make a whole lot of sense of, right? So I feel that Singapore is very well positioned to be this sort of jumping off point for these composers and these audio professionals. At the same time, we have very little, because of the way Singapore is and how small the domestic market is. I don't think that Singaporeans who are unable to travel overseas have great access to such talent. They don't have access to even be talking to these people, listening to these people, right? So I wanted to bring all these people in for workshops, right? Because on the one hand, it positions them as experts so that they can use the geographic location of Singapore to branch off into other countries if they want to do business trips. And yeah, you know, and then eventually I wanted, when this was established as credible, I wanted to make it a platform also for locals and regional people, right? I mean, I didn't want to jump the gun, right? Because if you start with the local thing, maybe you can do something good, but I mean, this is a private enterprise, right? I had to find a way to sort of make it financially successful as quickly as possible. So trying to bring in Western talent that I know and that will speak, will come when I ask, because we've developed a relationship, you know? So it was sort of like, there are several purposes, right? Kind of helping to put Singapore on the map, at least as an event location, right? And then being able to foster these networking experiences that wouldn't have happened for a lot of people that cannot go overseas, you know, like because the biggest game development conference is in San Francisco and it's very expensive to go to, right? Not just the flight, but also just staying in that bloody city, right?
Yeah.
So, and then once that was done, once I managed to sort of like create this small growing community, I would use it also as a platform for education, like professional education for people who want to learn more skills and for the people who are already in the industry who want to pivot into education, they would be able to use that as a platform to provide workshops, whether it's corporate workshops at game companies that want to upskill their staff or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things, but it was supposed to start off as an opportunity for learning and networking. Specifically that we are doing the learning in Singapore. Yeah, because I had some disagreements with some Singaporeans who felt that I was too focused on external speakers, especially they were mostly white guys, right? And I understand where that's coming from, because I've tried to build my career in a place where the industry is very wide, you know, it's wider than Singapore. Right? So I feel like I understand that, but we also have to look at, I hate to use the word pragmatic, right? Because it makes me sound like a PAPer, right? But we have to be pragmatic and look at the long-term goal. You know, what's the long-term goal? And do we sacrifice the long-term goal by having the short-term satisfaction, right? Of, yay, we did something grassroots. In the end, I mean, like then no one else outside of that gives a shit.
Right.
And I want those people outside of that to give a shit. So we need to sort of, I think there's a method. But I wasn't given a chance to prove that I was right, because like immediately after I announced it, pandemic, you know, economic crisis, riots,
everything.
And I was like, okay, whatever, man. The world doesn't want it. Yeah.
What's your take on kind of the industry for commercial music in Singapore, in your own experiences?
So I haven't had that many opportunities to work with Singaporeans yet, because it's, you know, I've spent 10 years overseas, and in Singapore, sometimes people have a bit of a kampong mentality, so you have to be around.
It is true.
You know, yeah. So on that note, you know, I haven't really done that much work at home. I do hope to work with some, but I also don't want to be caught in a position where I am being nickel and dimed by all my clients, which is why I plan to keep a fairly diverse portfolio from everywhere. right? Not just one country, not just the US. I hope to work with people in Europe, China, whatever, and we're making headway in that. And actually, recently we've been working with an ad agency in Singapore, right? On a bunch of different things that may or may not happen, right? So that's sort of the beginning. As far as like, will I write for National Day? If they ask, I don't know if I'll say no, but probably. Because if I say yes, I'll get myself in trouble because I cannot shut my mouth. So as you can see, yeah, I don't have that much. So to answer your question, I know I digress a lot, but to answer your question about my experience working in the commercial industry in Singapore, from what I've seen in my limited experience, there is a very small domestic market, yet also a reluctance to explore opportunities outside of that domestic market.
What do you mean by that?
Because people will complain that people in Singapore don't appreciate music, but they will not necessarily, they will keep banging their heads on that wall instead of trying to make it elsewhere. And the thing is, and I don't mean travel elsewhere to try and make a living as a gigging musician. That's not what I'm talking about, right? We have so many democratized tools for people to get their name out there and whatever. Like, I mean, on LinkedIn, the first video that you played of my game music, right, has like 11,000 unique viewers in like on LinkedIn, right? It's not YouTube, it's not Instagram, right? But that's pretty good, right? And people have started to contact me from big companies as a result of that, right? And it's not just because I'm putting my work out there, right? It's also because you have to understand something about the way people communicate. And you have to have conversations with those people. It's not like they just come and give you a gig. It's a very long process. So, but the thing is, that process doesn't cost me any money. Well, it cost me a LinkedIn premium subscription of $600 a year, something like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, in order to use all the functionality, right? But Singaporeans, whether there's enough talent or not, I am not going to comment on, because out of 5 million people, there's got to be someone good.
Yeah, of course.
There's got to be someone good, right? And we have, by the way, the 5 operas that I staffed were written, the libretto was written by a person who was born in Singapore.
Oh, wow.
She left when she was 16 and she's never looked back, right? Why do we drive away people like that who are clearly able to do something, right? But yeah, there are so many conflicting problems, right? There are too many alternatives. People say to me, wow, so nice for you to work in America where people appreciate music. Hello, I know people who are trying to get on Broadway, living in a tiny studio apartment or living with several roommates for years, who will outplay you,
cafes.
who will continue to outplay you for 3 lifetimes, even if you practice for that long, right? And they are still doing it. So you, standing on your pinnacle of mediocrity, right, don't get to tell me, right, that I have managed to build a fraction of a career because of just the geography, right? There are people like Lewis Cole, right? He's a drummer, right, and a musician, composer, right? He got famous because of YouTube, right? People are getting famous on TikTok, right? I think that these tools are becoming very available for Singaporeans, but they need to put in the work.
Yeah, it was absolutely interesting. I mean, I was just looking up what kind of influences are there in Singapore. Besides, I mean, there are some, but it's such a small population as compared to other countries where, I mean, that's a bad statement to make, but yeah, I absolutely know what you're saying. I do have one question, and this is really about kind of putting your content out there for, especially for like classical contemporary music. It's always a problem. It's not something that people are actively looking for. Even if you put it on LinkedIn and all that, I've always questioned about the effectiveness of that.
If you want if if you want 5 million people to like your work and pay for it, you must create work that is to the taste of 5 million.
Right. This is where there's a divergence, obviously, right?
Yeah, because if you're doing contemporary classical music, and especially if you're writing the kind of contemporary classical music I'm thinking of when I was talking to you about it earlier, you have to accept that your audience is necessarily going to be niche.
Yeah.
And so
for
you
sure.
are competing for the same niche audience everywhere, right? I mean, when I was in New York and I was at a workshop of one of the operas that I was staffing in Boston, right? They went up there for a workshop. Every single person in the workshop had white hair. We have to admit to ourselves that, like, what is art? Art has to reflect people, right? It has to reflect a public consciousness. It cannot be about you. It cannot just be about you. Some of it can be about you, right? The fact that you did it, your name's on it, that's you already. Get over it. That's enough. That's enough. You know, it really, I think it's enough, right? You've already left your mark. And the thing is, how much better will you leave your mark if you create something that touches the hearts of like millions? Isn't that
Right.
something that it's good to aspire to?
Yes, but I think we might disagree on what that thing is, right? The ways of arriving at something that touches people. Because for you, this is smooth jazz, but for someone else, it might be this. It's true.
No, but don't misunderstand me. Like, I don't think that smooth jazz is the only thing that touches people. I think honesty
It does,
does.
but it does.
Yeah, sure. It
Yeah.
touches some people. It touches some people, right? And you have to find the thing that's in your voice, and in your experience, and but we have to also be honest with ourselves about what our voice is, because, like, as a Singaporean person, we are basically living in what for many years, I think, was quite musically, culturally bereft. You know, we don't have that deep history. And I'm not going to say they were lucky, but Black people in America, right, had hundreds of years of managing suffering, right, giving rise to, and not only that, right, hundreds of years of managing suffering with tools that they had from thousands of years of history in West Africa, right? For us in Singapore, we are essentially playing other people's music and telling other people's stories. I'm doing that all the time, and that's okay with me. But I think that if we are dissatisfied, then perhaps we should stop relying on the tools of the white man who owned us.
I think this is where the whole idea of identity starts coming in, and which is why a lot of the younger composers do struggle with this question and trying to find a unique voice. I think for me, kind of doing this whole series has been very interesting because I'm not a composer myself, so I don't come in with the same kind of perspective, and I'm always looking at it as an observer, and thinking about, you know, why are you thinking this way, or what are concerns you are having, and so it's refreshing to hear from a different point of view and from a kind of a commercially viable, right? You know, it has to be
somewhat.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not talking about like making something that's just, you know, just
cheap,
something that's there one day and gone.
Right, of course.
You know, if we want to create something of lasting value, right? I mean, there's a reason George Gershwin is known as one of the greatest American composers, right? Is because a large part of his voice comes from American music, right? And Charles Ives and people like that, and we need to as Singaporeans, have we contemplated this enough, or are we chasing someone else's goal? Are we chasing someone else's dream?
I can say quite emphatically that this is a question that people are asking all the time, and it's and thank God, as not being a composer, I don't have to answer it. For me, I just have to look at the music in front of me, and I just have to execute that. And so my life is much easier. But that's
I'm gathering that you probably have some influence with artistic directors and administrators and things like that. You have a part to play as well. I mean, in being able to, if you have a vision, right, being able to promote the kind of music that you think Singapore needs to hear, or like, you know,
Yes,
because
I
even though you're
think
not a composer,
mhm,
yeah,
that's valid. And so I feel my responsibility is to expose people to as wide, as diverse styles as possible, and not
mhm,
just something that speaks to me. Because I feel like with a wide range of music, maybe something speaks to somebody else, and I think that's important. So for me, exposure, and also kind of like for me when I program stuff in school, at the conservatory, it might not be to everybody's taste, but I want them to have the experience of performing something that is,
mhm.
borderline unplayable, and they kind of struggle
Oh
through
yeah,
the whole semester, they curse and swear. But the fact that after they did it, and then they start to realize everything else becomes much easier in comparison. I mean, this is just one case in point,
mm.
which I think it's important. So somebody has to take the step and be, um, and take that as a perspective, take that as a
I
goal.
think that's a great approach to take with your students. You know, you gotta make, you gotta resistance training and all that, and make it really difficult for
Exactly.
them. Yeah,
Resistance
yeah. I
training.
mean, then of course, then outside of that, it's like when we're programming concerts for regular people. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
regular people who work, their full-time jobs, have their families, and they come, if for some reason, through some stroke of luck, they decided to go to a concert, you
Mm-hmm.
know, what are they going to experience? And that would be up to you, obviously.
Yeah, but even that, I mean, like, what's to say that they want to go to a concert hall and listen to Mozart, Beethoven? I mean, what's not to say that they want to go to a concert hall and just be hit by, I don't know, like rock sounds, or like, I don't know, like Steve
It's
Reich or something like that.
possible.
It's all possible.
Focus testing.
Yeah,
Because why are we having this conversation about the audience and what they think if we don't ask them?
that's true.
Yeah.
Then the
It's
other
also a kind
question.
of arrogance.
It is. It is. I mean, it's the question
Yeah.
about curation. If how do you sell something to people that they don't know about? But that's how Apple did it, right? They sold something to
Mm.
people that didn't exist, and they were successful at that. Of course, I mean, I'm not comparing. This is not apples to apples. This
Yeah.
is obviously
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
very different topic.
Yeah.
Um,
So there is a guy that I worked with, right? I got his oratorio recorded, right? He died, right? Last year, and he was a Baha'i man, right? He considered himself a Persian man, right? He's from Iran, right? And when he was a kid, he was persecuted for his religion,
hmm,
right? He was persecuted for his religion and for whatever other reasons, and he, he was, yeah, it was really bad. And one day he heard Beethoven's Fifth coming out of some tiny record store somewhere,
hmm,
right? And for him, that was like, a bolt of lightning,
hmm.
right? And then eventually he found his way to America, and then he got himself a degree, and he eventually became a successful person, right? Engineer and inventor. But that's like that's like, this is why this man has had a lifelong obsession and dedication to classical music,
Hmm.
and that's why he feels the way he does about it, because of that strong experience, and that hasn't changed. But is it just because he listens to classical music that's it? I mean, like, but should we take it upon ourselves to educate this person that he should be listening to other things?
Oh,
Does
I
it
mean,
matter?
I think that I
you know
think the main word there is should, because
yeah,
he shouldn't be doing anything he doesn't want to. I mean, in the end, it's
yeah,
the person who makes the choice. The consumer makes the choice.
yeah,
But what I'm saying is, I'm offering an array of stuff that he can choose from, and
yeah.
that's my responsibility
Mm.
to expose sounds very paternalistic, right? And like, look, I'm showing you this. No, but I'm showing
Yeah.
this is
Lim
this
Bei
is
Ka Le Kong.
everything. But this is everything's available, and you really take your pick. And I think it's it's a very sensitive topic that comes out again and again in terms of programming. It's hard to ever get to a conclusion because we're all trying out new things and seeing what works and different models and whatsoever. I think
if I may,
please.
sorry.
No.
If I may venture a thought is that I think in Singapore maybe we need to take. It's not we are taking. So this problem exists in America too, right? People are performing Beethoven like you've never seen it before, and then they have someone in a tutu like jumping off the stage. It's nonsense, right? It's just you're presenting the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think that if we truly are going to do something in Singapore that's Singaporean, it has to be completely transformed, like to the point that it's unrecognizable, and then maybe then something will catch on. But otherwise, we're doing like. It's like hiding your broccoli in ice cream or something. I think we need to radically transform it. I mean, I say we. I doubt that I will be the person to do it because I don't think I care enough that people listen to all this stuff. But I can understand where you're coming from, and it has to be like a radical shift. Actually, I was talking to John and David. From opera people, right? They stage they stage operas and stuff like that, and they change them a lot. And I was suggesting that maybe they could radically shorten the operas because first of all, people used to wait like a year to see one thing, right? That's why like it was a 5-hour extravaganza. Sure, who the hell has time for that now? People barely have time for a fucking 30-second TikTok video, right?
Yeah.
So I had an idea of radically shortening an opera and completely changing the instrumentation, rearranging it into so it would be sort of like almost a review, right? But with that, like, I don't know, you can do whatever, Ge Tai style. Who cares? Like, it's using a Western tuning system, right? It will fit, So like, maybe that would work, but that is so weird and out there, right? I don't know anyone do it.
I must say I haven't spent enough time on TikTok to understand what do classical musicians do up there.
I mean, in general,
a lot of things. A lot of
people. I brought up TikTok in the sense of I'm not saying that this should be on TikTok. I'm saying that people have
ideas.
People have no attention.
Yes.
No attention span. So if we're going to subject them to inflict upon them an hour-long thing, I think we can do them the decency of like, cutting it. I mean, I think at one point, if David and John like changed stuff to Singlish or something, or changed the lyrics or something. Yeah, I think they did something like that, which is already great, right? And I think that a lot of people who, especially these proper English elites, which by the way, I used to consider myself one of them, and I don't anymore, right? Hates English, right? Because they hate ourselves. I think we need to really lean into our identity. And I think that's why what they're doing is great, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, there are a few companies that are doing something along those lines already. So that's very, very good. Kind of localizing, settings to make it more relevant. I think relevance is really kind of the question. Why do people pay money to do something? Because they need to feel like they have gotten something out of it. It is essentially kind of a selfish thing. Everybody wants, whether they see it as entertainment or artistic or something that gets in touch with their inner self, it's really in it for them. Wow. I mean, we are almost at an hour and a half in our conversation, and it's really wide-ranging. We have gone to so many different parts that wasn't planned. I had a plan, but I kind of threw it out halfway because I thought just go with the flow and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind.
No, it was like chatting with a long boss.
Cat high buddies.
Cat high buddies. You're from SGI.
Yeah.
You're from Cat
High Primary. So I told you I got hit. I got
the ugly green pants and the buttons
and the stupid. Yeah. It looks so communist.
And then the buttons have engravings, right? I actually thought it was kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
cool. Yeah. I was very
Oh,
Chinese when I was in Cat High. Yeah. I was reading all the Chinese novels back then, and I was feeling like very Chinese.
wow. Nah, I never did.
And then I went to
That's why.
AC.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing, like, the whole process of um commercial music, and just even just something brief, gives us an idea of what's out there, what's possible. I think for younger composers in Singapore, this might be a possibility. Who knows? Again,
It might be.
I'm just offering
Yeah.
what's
I
out
mean,
there.
it's definitely something people do for a living, but there are
Yeah.
also a lot of people who do it and don't make a living because it's not easy to be good at this. I feel like I don't say that enough because I don't like saying that, wow, what I do is really difficult, you have to be a genius. It's like, it's not that. But it's really fucking hard to do this job, because not only do you have to write at a high level, you also have to be able to mix and produce the music at a high level. You have to understand the orchestra well enough that like certain idiosyncrasies and idiomatic writing for different kinds of instruments to make it sound realistic. And then on top of that, you need to do your own marketing. You need to be a personality. You need to go and shake hands, glad hand, and you need to network the hell out of everything, right?
Sounds
And
like a
then
conductor's job.
basically, right? I mean, you have to, not only do you have to memorize sometimes hours of music, which is ridiculous, and not only that, especially opera conductors, you have to look at 2 levels of things. It's really, it's an extremely difficult job, and I think that anyone who wants to go into it needs to understand that the job itself is like 20% of it, but you must be real good at that 20% in order to even have the privilege of doing the 80% of unrelated work to make a living.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a conductor, the 20% of making music on the podium is really the easiest part. And even that's not easy,
Really?
because you have to deal with so many people, you have to deal with a lot of human relationships, you have to deal with, what if in the rehearsal something happens, then the atmosphere changes. What do you do at that point?
Right.
And then what if the piece that you're doing is a piece that they've seen it for the first time, and it's not a good reaction, and how do you placate them? And there's so many of that, and on top of that, you still have to do the BS of shaking hands and talking to people, and that really wears you out. That to me is the singular most annoying thing about the job.
I'm very bad at the like, if people don't like a part, like say, like, I can't breathe here, just then take out 1 note, I don't care. Or like, if this is too high, like, this needs to be on piccolo trumpet. Are you being paid for a double? No, leave it out. Because if they didn't want to pay you, right, why the hell should you kill yourself, right, and work for free to, so I mean, I've worked with the union also before, so that's why I have this, have this mentality. Yeah.
Great. So before I conclude the episode, I just like to pick out a comment by Emily Cole. She say, "Thank you.
Hi, Emily.
I felt a little attacked tonight. Haha. As a composer who doesn't write pretty music, but I do feel like we all can have our space in a very small music scene in Singapore and abroad, and I think that's important."
I mean, to be clear, Emily, like, I don't think that beauty only resides in things that are obviously beautiful. But I do think that beyond sort of like the personal experimentation and stuff outside, like, it depends on your goals, right? I mean, if your goals are not necessarily to be heard all over the world, then fine. Right? It doesn't matter. It's for me, the issue only comes when you have a composer that refuses to write anything that normal people would be able to listen to, and then also complains that no one has respect for their music.
I understand what you're saying. So it's about managing the expectation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is.
Absolutely. You can write anything you want. Like I write smooth jazz, and by the way, I've been attacked for it. So you get attacked no matter what you write, right? So like just write whatever you want, and manage your manage your expectations.
Absolutely. I think that's really kind of the bottom line of the whole thing. And this whole idea about hustle, hustle mentality, going back to that again, you put in as much work as you want, and in the end, you have to be comfortable with the amount of work you put in. And if you are, you can sleep at night, then that's it. And you cannot expect something to change overnight. But it's just
of course,
yeah. Hey, thanks so much for doing this. It's been a fun chat.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I hope to see you finally in Singapore someday. Hang out with John
and
David.
I finally got short-term visa approved for my wife, who is from the US. I mean, we're both here in Ireland right now because have to have a special application for short-term visas now. So we just got one, so we'll be coming back end of August.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So you have to do 2 weeks, after that we can hang out.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. So see you. Have a good night. Soon? 6 o'clock?
Soon I will have a good night.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.